Okay. I was just actually, somebody mentioned recording, and I said, oh, yes, I guess I'm supposed to be recording this. So, yes, we're recording this. And I am healthy for the moment. A little bit of tuberculosis and some residual Ebola, but otherwise I'm fine. And as you can see, we're all working from home, which is pretty cool. And some of you are probably working from home for the first time, and you're realizing that you used to get toilet paper for free. But that's not happening anymore because you're not going to somebody else's office where they provide it for free. So I'm offering anybody who wants to buy a roll, maybe $15. That includes delivery. But seriously, no. As Peggy said, we are looking at this from a variety of angles, and certainly are willing to offer that insight that we have. But we really hope that we hear a lot from you guys, because I think the wisdom of the crowd is going to be very helpful here, because everybody is facing a slightly different situation. So,
Excellent. So, I guess what I want to start with, I don't know if we've got Allison Freitas from ACES International on the chat here, but if we do, I'd love for you at some point to raise your hand, because you were one of the folks that responded to the Collaborate discussion about how are you communicating. I did like the fact that you mentioned, so this is a kind of an idea from ACES, from Allison, that they're hosting a special chapter leaders open house on Thursday, encouraging them to use Zooms for meetings, so that's cool. And I don't know if Christine Bailey, who is with Ladies Professionals Golf Association. Now, one thing that they did, and again, this isn't a Collaborate chat, but they have a really kind of a lengthy post on things that they're doing. But I love to it, and that's why I'm hoping if she's on that we can have a little more conversation, because it says visit our leader resource site, where they're giving some additional information and ideas. So I kind of picked up some of those, but let me ask you a couple of questions, Diana, because it was your post that really kind of grabbed my attention. So I understand you've got about 50-some chapters, is that right?
That's correct. We've got 52.
Okay, perfect. Now, I love the fact that you mentioned, I'm just going to say the things that you mentioned, and then I'll just have you, let's just do a dive into some of these. And we totally get the fact that you're like the rest of us. You're kind of diving in and saying, what can I try? And not everything's going to work. And we're not putting you or anybody else on the spot, because the most important thing is that we have the opportunity to say, I'm trying this, and then get ideas so we can try it maybe differently or take it to the next level. But you set up a virtual meeting to inform it. Now, people need to understand that I know that you've got a lot of chapter execs as well as some volunteer leaders that you're working with. And so you mentioned that this was for the chapter execs, but you also mentioned that you are looking at how can you make NAIOP's web streaming platform available to them. And you also, what I thought was really cool was said, let me bring in some of our senior staff who can give some advice, like this idea if I have all of these sponsors and now what do I do? So let me just throw that was your response. Did you have that virtual call yet? And how did it go? And maybe just sort of a follow-up to that post. What else can you tell us?
Sure. Well, I'm pleased that we did hold that virtual meeting yesterday. We got great feedback. People really appreciated that. And basically the lineup was letting them know, first and foremost, of course, that we're there for the chapters because they, their members are our members. And we set it up so that we had different department heads, in different areas, share the things that they would most likely really need urgently. So we did talk about, what are the educational topics that we need to produce. And we talked about how we're going to be putting together this, what we call a solution series, webinars and other educational program snacks that will directly address topics most relevant within the member industry. That's what we're seeing, and our members industry is the commercial real estate. And we talked about, getting content, making that available to the chapters. We talked about our vice president for business development talked about, how to help them handle their sponsors. What are ways to try and not lose that revenue completely by their canceling events? And so he offered different options that he's taken with our corporate sponsors. And so he gave them great ideas. We had our vice president for marketing and communications share best practices on how to, on messaging that they need to be aware of, what not to say, as well as, the things to say and how to say it, during this crisis management mode. We had our meetings director give, great advice about the contract clauses. Everyone's using force majeure, and what are clauses that we're using to invoke to get out of, to mitigate our penalty.
Mitigate.
And all this, we're definitely inviting them to contact us and let us know what they need. And so we've heard from them. We've heard from the chapter saying, hey, we need your help. You mentioned we're offering them contract reviews so that we can help them pick out what things that they need to focus on, giving them sample letters on what to submit to their hotel venues. So we're trying to be very proactive. We did get, we don't already share our web streaming service, our Zoom webinar platform with chapters. So we are offering that up to them so that they can, again, recapture or try and capture as much of the great content they've already developed and set up with their speakers. Nice. And continue to at least create value and create that engagement. Peggy, you're always so great about talking about those, touch points with the members, keeping them engaged. And that's what we really need to do when everyone has canceled all their events and suspended that networking and interactivity.
Right. Let me pause you for just a minute, because I want to go back. I want to ask two specific questions. And folks, while she's talking, if you have a question for her, put it in the chat, and we will continue to bring some folks in. And I see that Kristen and Allison are here, so I'm hoping that we'll be able to add them to add a little bit of color here. But let me ask you two questions. I'm going to throw both of them at you, and in any order. So I love the fact that you're saying, let's, if they've got some speakers set up, let's do Zoom. My question is, on that part of it is, how are you helping them actually make that happen? Because if somebody doesn't know Zoom, it's pretty intuitive, but on the other hand, you're already stress levels up here. So are you offering any sort of a support around that? And then I want to go back at some point related to this was this notion of you providing some education. So are you saying that you're going to provide some education that chapters can then send out in a way that allows them to maybe have a replacement for some stuff that isn't far enough in the process? So throw both of those questions to you.
Sure. So fortunately, we do have online educational courses and webinars using the Zoom webinar platform. So we already had training guides available. Mm-hmm. We are sharing that with the chapters. We are running a test, actually, because we haven't opened it up to another co-host, so to speak, or another co-producer. Mm-hmm. So we're running a test to test out how logistically this is all going to work. So we haven't moved forward yet, mm-hmm. work out those kinks, and we don't want to give up our login, right? So that's still going to remain with our corporate. We're not just giving them open access, but we'll help them with scheduling. We will schedule as many, we'll set it up, we'll be on their programs to troubleshoot tech support, but we're training them, giving them training materials on how they can at least get set up with Zoom and what to look out for as a organizer and speaker, so that they can train their speakers as well. So we are giving them that. Unfortunately, we had a lot of that material already mm-hmm. developed. With regard to the education, so we see it at two levels. There's the national level where we have topics that are going to pertain everywhere. But we're also going to offer to the chapters, we've got these national speakers that, these contacts, and we're happy to bring in these national speakers in this virtual forum. Mm-hmm. Chapters can bring in their local experts to share, what they're seeing in their particular markets, and we'll jointly put together a program just for that chapter and just for that market. So we'll do it both ways. We'll have national programming, but then for things that should, drill down to their local markets, we'll help the chapters customize and yet national scope.
Excellent. Okay, great. Just a quick note, I saw a couple of people saying that the chat is disabled, and I'm going to have Peter take a look at that, see if he can figure that out. So meanwhile, though, there's some questions for you related to both of these things. One of the questions is on sharing the Zoom platform. Curious how you are going to manage the logistics of various entities wanting to use it at the same time. So is there, what might be the thing that you might run into that?
Well, we have one centralized person at corporate who will handle the scheduling. So it's not necessarily first come, first serve, because we have so many chapters, we don't want one chapter, just claiming all the spots. So because our chapters do hold multi, events per week and things like that. So we are controlling that part in-house.
Okay.
We also have separate accounts. So we have one webinar account, and we also have a meetings account. So those who just want help with board meetings and, not webinar specific, not multi-speakers with the screen share, but if they just want to conduct a Zoom meeting like this, we have a separate account for that, and we'll also make scheduling for that as well.
Okay, great. So another question that came in was, and I'm scrolling through them as I go, and this one was, would you be willing to share the letters you mentioned that you're sharing with your chapters? So the notion about how do we help them navigate around the contracts and stuff like this. I don't know if there's pieces of it you can share, or, think about it or check on it. Some that could be some confidential, but they were just asking if there was a possibility for that, if you could check on that.
I'll be glad to check with our director of conferences for that.
Okay, great. So it said, with the chapter education content, is this going to be available to all members, kind of like a chapter content series, giving them branding and sponsorship credit, but making it available on a national platform level? So that's, Kate, that's kind of a neat idea, is how do you turn, lemons into lemonade, and they're creating this content and they're making it virtualized, and maybe, now I know, Dinah, you said, in some cases you're actually helping them put their own local kind of content into it, but if it's something that could go across, I don't know if you thought about that, or.
we definitely haven't gotten that far, but yes, we would to increasing the scope, and also the chapters can charge what they want for it as well, because we know that they're too. So if they make money off of something we're offering them to them complimentary, that's fine with us.
Yeah, cool. Go ahead, Peter.
So I was going to say, Allison had something to contribute here. I want to give her a chance to participate here. So Allison, I've just, I think, enabled your mic.
Yes,
hi everyone.
perfect.
Can you hear me?
Hey, yes.
Yes, awesome.
All right, so I'm Allison Freitas with ASIS International. I actually was listening to all of Diana's kind of suggestions, because as Peggy noted, we will be having, ASIS International is having a kind of, I would say like a special chapter leaders open house, which we're hosting tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. And that is as a response to all of, what should we do in a time of meetings? How do we host these events? And really what our main focus is going to be, which is similar to what Diana was mentioning, is we'll have our VP of meetings on, who can kind of, shepherd all our leaders through some of those legal contracts, legal jargon. And our statement from HQ was to not host meetings through April 30th. So we've actually gone ahead and canceled a lot of our meetings. So we are asking our chapters to follow that and really trying to get them to use Zoom. So they are trying to connect virtually. We're going to really try to push that. And we'll also have our senior director of IT on the line to try to help them with, kind of tackling that and working with that. And just to note, because I heard Diana mention that she has one staff person, kind of working through all those chapter meetings. What ASIS does is we are actually 247 chapters in 15 kind of senior regional groups in 51 regions. And we actually give our senior regional leaders and our regional leaders a Zoom license so that they're working with their respective chapters to schedule.
Excellent.
I would have to, I have no idea what the numbers are, what sort of, how expensive that is for that many user licenses. But I do know that our CEO has even encouraged, after tomorrow's call, if we need to actually buy more licenses for our chapter leaders, then we might actually explore that as well.
Yeah.
So if I can add just a couple of thoughts to that. In fact, there was a conversation here. Shannon indicated that they had chapters that have utilized non-educational Zoom meetings for revenue, asking if people utilized non-educational Zoom meetings for revenue generation. And I know revenue generation is always an issue if most of your events are in person and you charge a registration fee, and that contributes to the bottom line for the chapter, this is going to be a big problem for lots of organizations. There are two that I'm working with right now, two of our management clients. One had to move their conference off for 6 months, so there's going to be a cash flow question here, and two. We keep rotating with the other client, rotating our seminars further off into the future. So again, cash flow is going to be a problem. So going virtual is kind of nice, but if you're doing it for free, now you're putting the content out there and not generating that income. So right. Zoom does collect registrations, but it does not collect income. And so if you wanted to charge for registrations and use Zoom, you'd have to use something like Zap, Z-A-P, and they have little utilities that will link, for example, a registration from Zoom to PayPal to actually collect the money. And there is a fee for using Zap to collect money. But again, it's a way that the chapters could sort of easily begin to collect some dollars. And one of the interesting ideas that came up the other day when we were talking about a program we're running later on this year, we think, which may go from live to virtual, was to send out Grubhub coupons or Uber Eats coupons to people as part of the package of the registration. So the idea is that we're sharing a meal together and we're going to have a conversation together. And because I think that's part of what virtual is okay, but it's just not the same as being able to get in a room and have a conversation with people. And if there's some way we can sort of emulate that sense of breaking bread and talking.
It's like a virtual connection, eating together.
Exactly, I think that's really important. Idea. Yeah. So I think that may be a way to both collect some money, make some money, spend some money, but more importantly, reinforce that notion of we're getting together with each other and sharing.
Right. So I love that. I want to give a shout out because that Grubhub idea came from Sarah Garrity at Bill Highway. Yeah. And what I love about Bill Highway is they're a tech company, so they truly understand that you have to create community around virtual. And so, I mean, just really cool. While we're on the Zoom, I have a question from Shannon. I just want to put out there. Has anyone had chapters that have utilized the non-educational Zoom meetings for revenue? I know we've talked a little bit about that, but she said that her chapters are nurses who usually get sponsorships from some pharmaceutical companies, and are wondering about the possibility of potentially including ad spots during Zoom meetings if anyone's had experience with that. So if you've had experience with that, raise your hand or throw something in. One thing I can suggest, Shannon and Sarah, Bill Highway, and I've been talking about this because we get folks that say, they'll help underwrite some of the costs of some of the stuff we're doing for the community, and they want a little something. And one of the things we've talked about is, okay, shoot a 30-second or a 10 or a 15-second video, and we'll share it on our Zoom webinar potentially. So what we're saying is, that's our way of sort of jerry-rigging the ads. But has anybody ever used ad spots on Zoom meetings? Any thoughts about that? Let us know, because I think, Shannon, that's a brilliant question. We have to shift the dollars as well as kind of the attention for that. So really cool. Jessica asks, how far out are other associations canceling events? In her shop, they're looking at May 15th. So go ahead and type in those answers. I know that Peter just mentioned that we're looking at moving our One Chapter's annual conference, or we have moved it to October, and our thought was go as late as you could. That's not really answering that question directly, but we're trying to avoid, well, I guess what I'm saying is we're trying to avoid May and possibly June. It's kind of a crazy time for all of us, but type those in. Okay, Ashley, thanks. So at least early April. And it has to be maybe just a little bit of a changing thing. Liesl, thanks. Dozens, lots of stuff for the open water. The chat is working if you haven't already put the open water thing in. What she says is a tutorial that was really helpful. It's called getopenwater.com/COVID-19. And now, Jessica, you mentioned you have offered our webinar platform for a while to chapters, and it's been pretty efficient. So if you have anything else that you can offer, I think we're all trying to figure out how do we do that balance. So yeah, Peter.
So one of the things that we tried to do with particularly the one client where we were moving a major conference was to make sure we talked to everybody else who was probably doing the same thing in the same industry or professional space, because everybody and their mother right now is contacting their hotels and saying, I need to take my June event and move it to the fall. So I have a feeling it's going to be a very, very busy fall. So two things for chapters to think about. Who else is near?
Oh, we just lost you. Okay, go ahead.
Let's make sure we're talking to each other. And two, the scary sort of thing when you're trying to make this decision is how long can we wait? In our board call yesterday for the Maryland Recycling Network, they were saying, well, can't we wait for a while to make this decision? And I said, we can wait, but the longer we wait, the fewer options we will have from the hotel, because they're getting slammed as well. And so there's sort of an urgency here, but also a need to really make sure you've talked to everybody in your space before you go sticking something in the wrong place. As an example, one national show association that runs a big national show just parked their show literally on the same dates as a related association's conference in August. And that's going to be a problem for everybody, for exhibitors, for attendees, because they're all working with the same crowd. So we need to make sure we're communicating and coordinating as much as possible.
Okay, great. So let me ask this question, because I think I saw Kristen Bailey from Ladies Professional Golf Association. She said you were here, and I know that you had done a message and you had a link to your Leader Resource Center. If you're available, I'd love to just put you on.
Just raise your hand.
Just raise your hand.
Yeah, Anessa has raised her hand as well. So okay,
good. So go with either one of them. And let me also, though, what advice did you give continuing sponsor benefits? So while we're bringing those other folks on, Diana, what did your exec, your senior exec, your VP, was he VP of Business Development? Sorry. What did he say about kind of continuing the sponsor benefit? Anything?
So he mentioned that try to allow them to give them credit for the following year's conference so that they would still remain committed. It would also avoid, having to refund them. And so at least we still kept their revenue on our books. So that was one particular idea, was not to necessarily, if you couldn't postpone your event, to just totally apply it to the following year, was one thing that our chapters have considered.
Okay, great. And if anybody else suggested, just go ahead and type it in. Yeah. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah. Let me bring Kristen in here. Kristen.
Hey, Kristen, come on in.
You're on.
Hi, this is Kristen. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. So in terms of the impact of COVID for us, we're a very chapter-centered membership. I work for the LPGA Amateur Golf Association. So we are part of the Ladies Professional Golf Association, but we're under the foundation. So we have 13,000 members, but we are very chapter centered. And as you can imagine with golf, a lot of our chapters were about to have their kickoffs and season openers and stuff like that. So it really threw us a wrench. But what we did immediately is we have a leader resource site based through Knowledge Out, and we have an urgent news section where we are providing the most frequent and updated information in terms of the coronavirus and recommendations from the CDC and WHO. And I know Trump just launched a 15-day recommendation. So we keep adding to that, and we tell them to keep checking there for information. And then we also, in that same section, have a running list of ideas for connecting with members virtually and online during this time, because, you know, each of our chapters are a community, and they want to, you know, stay connected with each other. And we also want the members to continuing to see the value of membership on their end. Do you want me to go through a few of those items that I listed there?
I would, you know, if you don't mind, I mean, I think the thing that we're all trying to figure out right now is what resources are going to be most valuable for us to give our chapter leaders. I kind of say to people that one of the most important things is to give them time to talk, but at some point you have this. So if you've got some additional resources that, I mean, if you could just tell us a little bit about some of the resources you put in there, that would be great.
Yeah, so we actually had a spreadsheet created for different online platforms that they can utilize, and we had some free platforms available for them. We made sure to have groups of 100 and then also groups of 1,000 available. So when we did that, we linked the how-to videos for them, so they can access those as well. We are encouraging them to promote. We're actually throwing on the global level, we're throwing some extra member benefit webinars during this time. So we're encouraging them to promote those member benefit webinars. Yeah. So hopefully they will do a good job at that and show the value of membership. We are throwing a few golf related webinars for those who can't golf right now. So encouraging them to promote those as well. We're going to have some member orientation webinars. Usually our chapters run it, but we are going to help them out and do some worldwide LPGA amateur member orientation webinars. Because they were having their kickoffs, a lot of them do silent auctions. So we provided that suggestion for them as well.
Okay.
And then we have just some virtual and fun events for them to do. So a suggestion that we gave them was like they could do a book club. They could watch an old golf tournament together. We also have creating online leagues, utilizing apps to play as a group together. Maybe it's cards, you know, and then also caption that photo. So photos from last season and last year, and having them go ahead and you know, maybe do a point system. So the first person the person who has the most points added up can get maybe free admittance to the next event. So those are some of the ideas I pulled together. On top of that, you know, we've been just making a list of risks and trying to eliminate them. And I think we're going to probably come up with some merchandise to sell to our members, because they love merchandise, and they recently really loved the social post that we posted. So we're going to probably do that. And then we're looking at possibly doing a virtual conference to offer to our membership as well.
Okay. I feel like I was trying to grab all of the notes as you were talking. I don't know if do you have like a tip sheet or anything that you've given your chapters that maybe you would be willing to share at large? Sure. That would be like awesome. If you send it to Mariner, you know, here just to the, you know, reply to the webinar, I'd be like way happy to share it out widely. Sure. I totally love, I mean, I went like, yes, this is a group that plays together. So an app, you know, one of the crosswords or one of the word games or something, one of the apps, and getting them to do these leagues. I mean, and we're all going to go stir crazy. So I totally love that set of ideas, the online league and all.
But you would think golf is a natural sport for maintaining social distance, so we should play as much golf as we can, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of things unrelated, Marianne asked an interesting question. She said, "Is anyone looking at providing direct financial assistance to the chapters?" And I don't know of anyone who's doing that. I do. John Bellotti made a great point here. He said, "Look, we can't afford to provide a license to every single one of our chapters, but we do have GoToWebinar's Flex plan, which allows us to provide, we have a certain number of licenses we can use. And the reality is everybody is not going to be using the platform at the same time. So if you can manage the sequencing, you might only need a handful of licenses. It just, you have to schedule it so that people are not using them simultaneously and be able to sort of spread that cost a little bit further. Diana, you were going to suggest that you're giving each chapter $1,000. That's
no, each household.
Your stimulus plan.
No, now we haven't actually told the chapters this. We didn't want to open it up quite yet, but we have talked about that we are willing to assist them financially. So we don't have anything set up, but we certainly, have in the past, historically, in cases where we've either offered chapters, interest-free loans over a period, and we also have advanced next year's dues to the chapters before. So we've had that history. So we have talked about do that.
Yeah.
We just don't want to advertise it right now. Right. But if someone comes to us and asks, we looked at everyone's reserves level. So we, track that annually anyway. But we did pull that list and said, okay, which are the chapters that don't have, their percentage of the amount, of the reserves as a percentage of their annual budget isn't significant enough to really maybe last the year. So we already targeted which chapters we need to be on the lookout for.
Yeah. Well, that's good because cash flow is going to be a big issue, I think, across the board for chapters. Allison, I think, wanted to jump back in.
Yeah, and while you're doing that, Kristen, someone asked, are your webinars free during this time?
So for the member webinars, we are going to have it free at this time just because we want to show the benefit of being a member, and we are a very event-centric association. So we're going to come out with probably like 5 webinars in the next month and then have them all free. And then looking forward, we might add a price to them.
Excellent. Thank you for answering that question. And go ahead, Peter. Who were you going to bring on?
Well, I thought Allison had her hand raised, but maybe she changed her mind.
Allison Freitas, because she's still on, right?
She's still on, but...
she's muted. Okay.
Okay, John Bellotti raised his hand, so let's hear what John has.
Yeah, John, please, because you said a couple of things, and I want you to tell us a little bit more about this vendor sponsor running the webinar on the chapters account, because that sounds kind of interesting. John, are you on?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, yes, we can. Awesome.
All right, great. We have a great program. I think, Peggy, I know we worked with you guys, 2 years ago, I think it is almost now, with our chapters. And one of the things that came out of it was webinars and these things called simulcast events and collaborative events. Well, we've been working on that for the past 2 years, and we're ready to implement them as of this coming education season, which is for us, starts after tax season is over.
Yeah.
So here I am preparing for all this, and then this all happened. So a couple of things that our chapters have been doing that we piloted so far is we are doing obviously webinars, and we have this thing called a Flex account. We pay for 5 licenses. If we go to 6, we just pay a little bit more for that license in that given month. So it works out really good for our chapters because some chapters can't afford that license. So we just give that essentially, we just charge them for X amount for each of those licenses. We take registrations, we set up the webinar, we do all that for them. And then I teach them how to run the webinar, maybe being on their first 1 or 2. And some of them have done an awesome job. So they know how to handle it once they get going. Some of them have had a vendor sponsor webinar. One of our chapters out west had a vendor sponsored webinar. They got somewhere around 60 people or something on it, which was phenomenal. They actually charged the vendor for them to be on this webinar. They said, look, we can't give you the people's names that are on this, but we're happy to send an email for you to them advertising your stuff. it was really cheap. It was like $10 for members to attend. The sponsor got to say a 30-second spiel in the beginning, and then no more promos were allowed throughout the entire webinar until at the end. Again, they said, just remember, we're so-and-so. If you want more information, here's our contact information. So it worked out really, really good. And we have some other chapters that are also doing these virtual either webinars or simulcast events. Simulcast events fit under the guidelines of the current group gathering guidelines. So these simulcast events are live events that are maybe given in 3 towns, or it could be more towns now, where people gather in small gatherings and view the webinar, so to speak, together, so that they can have this in-person effect, but also have the virtual effect at the same time. And we have one of our biggest chapters is looking to do one of those in May to keep the attendance down while also raising attendance, if that makes sense, in various locations. So they might have 6 locations, 10 people each location, where they would normally come together in a single location. So that's also another thing that we're doing as well.
Okay, great.
It's really exciting
cool.
stuff.
I mean,
so.
I had never heard of the Flex account for WebEx, so that is very cool to hear. But you know, don't you feel a little like that you were a little bit of premonition that you were already getting all this stuff geared, and then it's
my writing my typing ability has extremely gone up very fast. So I'm typing out all these guidelines and documentation that I've had in my head, because I've been doing these virtual events for I don't know 15 or 20 years, and now trying to get it all on paper, and it has been interesting.
So note to Sarah, who on Bill Highway, I think still on. I think we're going to bring John on for one of our monthly webinars on everything you can do to make your chapters have decent events virtually. Thanks, John.
You're welcome.
I wanted just to mention that Anne from AIA, hi Anne, says that this is kind of cool. She said they're holding a webinar for chapters tomorrow about how to transition their face-to-face continuing education to a virtual format. It's going to cover procedures for meeting the CE standards. So see, I think that is very important, because sometimes the driver that gets some of our folks in the door is the fact that they're going to get this CE. So just kind of curious if you're willing to raise your hand and just jump in there a little bit about any tips that you can give us in terms of what it means to make that transition from an in-person to a virtual. So maybe there are some of us that could begin to look at that as how do we support our very event-driven chapters. And while we're seeing if you raise your hand, and there she is. Hi,
hey.
Ann. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. You guys, I take back everything I said about Peter looking less healthy than Peggy. He seems to have made a rapid recovery. Yeah, so basically, well, it's interesting because I'm not with the CE team, and I'm going to be attending that webinar tomorrow so I can learn. But essentially, and I'll be happy to share that, but our continuing education providers all have to meet standards, and there's a booklet. And the booklet already lays out, if you're doing a face-to-face, you can just do it. You know, people sign up, they get their CE. But if it's if it is a live event, they can still just attend and sign in. I mean, if it's a live virtual event, they can just sign in and get their credits. However, if it's an asynchronous event, that is to say on demand, then you have to offer a quiz to prove that they took in some information. So this training tomorrow which I am not familiar with, because when I ran a local chapter before I came to National, I never did one of those. So I'll be learning with the rest of them and how to do this, and I'm very excited. We've got, I cannot tell you, I think we've got 210 chapters, and I think all but maybe 3 of them are going to be on that. It's unreal.
Wow.
Yeah. But interestingly, before that, on Tuesday, we had our own idea swap for our chapters. And and it was because people were understandably very nervous about all these things. I mean, they're nervous about revenue. They're nervous about keeping their sponsors happy. They're worried about force majeure, all these things. They're even looking at, sick leave policies, pandemic plans for our professional firms who are members.
Mm-hmm.
What are what are the tools? I mean, all these things we've been talking about. And so we went over all this and we answered as many questions as we could. Our CEO came on there and he said, look, guys, we're all learning. AIA, the national organization, does not have all the answers. And interestingly enough, people came back and said, thank you for admitting you don't have all the answers because we feel better.
Perfect.
I thought that was really beautiful of him. And
Yep.
he closed by saying, look, you're worried about revenue, you're worried about member engagement. The first rule in a crisis like this is to recognize that we are a community and we are here to serve. And the more we serve people, the more they will be there for us. So I think that that feeling of we're here to help our members is going to go a very long way in helping. You don't want to give everything away for free. I mean, keep charging. I love the idea of the $10 for a virtual webinar because it's a little skin in the game. They'll actually show up and not blow it off. But just helping them and answering their questions and pointing them to resources, they're going to return that loyalty in the long run. I just thought that was a really beautiful thing that our CEO actually stuck his neck out and brought that human element, and it's not all just business.
Right. So I just want to underscore, because that was the CEO, and that alone, I mean, the message is wonderful, but for so many chapter leaders, and I can just tell you right now, I mean, I'm the group that I'm managing. It's been nothing from the national organization. In fact, we just got our business as usual email asking us to send out notices to members to be aware that, that their membership was up for renewal shortly. And I'm like, dude, no.
And
so
giving
I love
people
the
an
fact
extra
that your CEO
month.
understands it. Yeah.
Yeah, giving them an extra month. It's not that much, and that's actually, well, okay. That's being discussed and our board hasn't approved it, but it's an idea.
It is an idea. Good. So, and I'm just this is an aside. It's personal, and this part we'll edit out of the chat. But we do have a son in California who's in his first full year of employment as an architect.
Condolences.
And we need the San Francisco Bay chapter to be successful and reach out and make my kid's firm successful so he keeps his job. But that's just another whole story, Ann.
Good luck.
So we have a couple other hands raised here. I want to make sure before we get to the end of our time
Yeah.
Michelle wanted to add something. Michelle?
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. So kind of going off of what Ann was saying, we're a chapter-based organization that works with lawyers and judges around the country, and our primary mission is to promote civility, collegiality, and professionalism in the field. And that relies very heavily on face-to-face meetings every month. And obviously that's not going to happen now. So what we're doing is we have an online learning platform that we are co-opting to create kind of these mini sites where our chapters can host online virtual meetings. But what we wanted to do was do kind of this meta demonstration of how that would work. So we are creating an online program, inviting our chapter leaders to attend, and then showing them what it would be like to host a virtual networking hour and an educational program and collect assessments so that their members can get education for that. So that's kind of what we're looking at, is sort of being our own guinea pigs in a way, and co-opting systems that we already have.
Okay, great. What's the software or the program or the whatever that you're using for all of that?
It's called PATH, P-A-T-H.
P-A-T-H. Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that you guys have used.
Yes. Yeah, we use it
Okay.
for webinars and, you know, behind a login. So
Okay.
members log in and they can access webinars for a fee or for free and get
Okay.
credits.
Okay, that's very cool. I mean, so what's interesting, guys, in this example and in John Bellatti's example, a couple of examples that we've heard, is that we at national organizations, now Peter and I technically aren't a national organization, but we've got some software that we're using anyway, and this gives us an opportunity by sharing it and teaching our chapter leaders, who, by the way, are our raving fans, right? It's getting them in another door and seeing another layer of us, so that there's kind of an extra bonus to all of this. So that's cool. And Michelle, we want to hear more about that as you roll that out. If that would be, I think that gives us another kind of thing that we can use.
Sure.
Stacy just did say, can you share the networking calls, what the shared networking calls are like? Do you ask general questions? Do you open the floor and let members ask questions? So can you tell us anything about those networking, the on paths, or maybe we need to come back to you and ask all those questions once you've run it?
Yeah, it might be a little bit of, you know, case by case basis. Some of our chapters, I think they're small enough that they could host kind of a Zoom call and do it that way before the actual program. Some of them, it might be more of a kind of a chat discussion, and some of them we might encourage to do kind of breakout sessions within their chapters. They have smaller mentoring groups, so maybe the mentoring lead would set up a video call and do it ahead of time, and then they all join in for the program at a specified time.
Okay, that's kind of cool. And that's important about getting the learning going, is to kind of do both of those. Peter, did you say that we had some other folks raising their hand? Let's get some additional ideas here. Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah, I think Lisa Costa raised her hand, but maybe went down. I don't know, Lisa, if you want to still have something to say.
Hey, Lisa.
Just raise your hand again if you do. We'll be happy to bring you in. While you're deciding, John Bellotti, John's back with us. So, John.
Yeah, can you hear me? Just double checking. All right, great. I think I hear a lot of stuff going on, which is awesome. A lot of great ideas. So thank you for that. I think one of the most important things that you can do, I just think this is a really great piece of advice that I learned from looking at all the different webinar platforms for trying to figure out what we were going to do, is really to try to know the goals of what you're trying to accomplish. So for example, the CE goal earlier, freeconferencecall.com won't work for that. But there are other programs like GoToMeeting. I'm not super familiar with Zoom, but where they log certain criteria throughout the call so that you can track people to determine whether or not they get CE because they did or didn't answer a specific poll question. Do you want people to be able to chat, see video, like all those things, really understanding what that webinar platform offers and whether or not it's going to meet the objectives of what you're doing. If you're just information sharing, hey, maybe you can use a free thing, but if not, then you might have to go something a little bit more complex and robust. And the thing I tell my chapter leaders is, just being okay at your first webinar is okay. You don't have to be spectacular. Being okay is okay. Being better as you go, that's your goal. So I just wanted to say that because I think those are two things that are super important in understanding this virtual world we're going to be in now.
Yeah.
And John, if I can add to that, I think it's a great point. What I've also found is there's variation in the standards and the licensing bodies across the range of professions and industries, and some have more stringent and some have less stringent requirements for virtual CE, and there's some that just flat out will not give virtual CE, period. So there may be some standards, but make sure when you look at the notion of providing CE, you got to check with the licensing board. In some cases, it's on a state-by-state basis. So I can tell you, for example, one of our clients in the DC licensing board will not offer virtual CE to us, period. So it doesn't matter whether we have good stuff or not, or what platform we use. So that's always a consideration when the CE comes up. But I think your point earlier is really critical, and that is the main reason people are looking for, or a key driver of attendance is CE. And so the extent that we can offer that's going to be really important.
I think working with those providers too, those what I forget what you call them, the people
licensing boards.
Yeah, the boards and stuff is really important too, because I think, you know, we've worked with we work with the IRS, we worked with our IRS people to either not get granted exceptions, so to speak, but, you know, like, okay, we're not going to look the other way, but you need to do this, or you need to do that. And we're like, oh, okay, so we know exactly what we need to do. Or in this situation, can we do this, or can we do that? And working with them and getting those relationships is really important to understanding that, and getting maybe this time of year, the current environment, maybe getting exceptions for certain things.
Yeah.
So I'd like to ask another kind of different kind of question. We've been talking about how chapters serve the members, but I wonder if there are issues we need to be thinking about in terms of how chapter leaders connect with each other, how we connect with chapter leaders. You know, what's different now, since everybody is sort of separated in ways that they perhaps haven't been before? Is there emotional support we should be providing? Should we provide Grubhub coupons to all of our chapter leaders? But how can we help them connect with each other in ways perhaps they hadn't thought of connecting before? I know, for example, I was on a call. I was on 2 different calls with clients yesterday. In one, the group is entirely used to using their cameras. And so this fundamentally changes how the meeting goes. The other one, there were no cameras at all. And I'm really trying to push them gently to the notion of using their cameras, because it changes entirely the flavor of the meeting. So I think, you know, those kinds of things may be areas where we want to spend some more time just to make sure that the cohesiveness of the chapter is sustained. And that's not an issue of how the chapter is serving the member. That's a matter of how the chapter is really serving its leadership and its worker bees.
Yeah, and so let's take it also one additional step, and thank you, Anne, for jumping in there. It sounds like your discussion board is getting a bit more active, and I'm expecting that to happen, I'm going to guess, across the system. So part of what we have to do also is have our own community managers kind of being there. But I did see earlier someone chat and say that they're canceling their leadership conference. So Peter and I are on tap to do about 4 more leadership conferences this year so far, and we're anticipating that more leadership conferences will be canceled or whatever. But I am working with one group right now, super excited about it, because they're turning it into an entirely virtual event. And what I love about that is understanding that even in this time of uncertainty, when people can't actually fly to the face-to-face meeting, we absolutely have to get folks. We've got to find that connectivity, get folks together. And so I think, Peter, to your point, if it's kind of, you extrapolate a little bit from that, is how do we maybe amp up the number of training videos or videos that we're giving? I mean, we're sort of talked a little bit about that, but at some point, maybe the 2020, I shouldn't say this because that's coming out of our pocket, Peter, but, well, no, you could hire us to do this. But anyway, maybe this is the year that you say, really, leadership training is going to be ongoing, and it's not going to be all dollars into a single event. So just as a kind of as a thought is that we are coming up against the time, and I'd love us to continue to chat. Peter just raised his hand, but there was.
We have Kristen had something she wanted to add, and I thought before she
Okay,
gets away.
great. I think she had a question too, so go ahead.
Yeah. Kristen, you still there?
Hey, I don't think it was actually me that needed to add anything. Sorry.
Okay, your hand was raised. That's why I.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
But someone did ask, Michelle, what did you call the initial chat? You had a chat for your chapter leaders, and you called it something, and we didn't write it down quick enough. And was it called Touch Base or Touch Today, or so type it in there or raise your hand, and we'll get that to you. And then Peter, there was one more question that came, and I'm going to give this to you because this is a question for our host, but I'm not the IT person. Curious if you prefer the Zoom webinar platform rather than just Zoom in general, and are there extra administrator capabilities beneficial? So real quickly on Zoom, because we use Zoom a lot.
Right. So we're on a Zoom platform, and you can do Zoom meetings, but Zoom meetings I don't believe have registration, which is one of the key functionalities that the Zoom webinar platform brings to the table. And also there are gradations in terms of the number of people who can actually sign up. So we have the Zoom platform that goes up to 100. what I love about Zoom, and we used to use GoToWebinar, is that it is a much less expensive platform than GoToWebinar. It's about a half or the third the cost. But as John noted, and this could be a critical point if you're trying to get CE, Zoom doesn't tell me, for example, if you're paying any attention to what I'm saying. Whereas GoToWebinar can actually tell if you leave the window of GoToWebinar and go start looking at your email, it'll say so-and-so is not paying attention. And Zoom actually, or GoToMeeting actually gives a report at the end that says so-and-so is paying attention X% of time, in which case you don't get any free toilet paper as part of participating in this webinar.
So I love it because at the end of the day, whether we can do the CE or not, you know, Kristen, you encouraged us to think about, you know, virtual ways of creating community. I love the fact that you just said, swap ideas and gave your phone number, but let's swap ideas. Like if anything you send to Peter and I will get out to everybody. And of course, there's always collaborate where we can be. I really am sorry that we've come to an hour. I think we could all spend another hour, but we will let it go ahead and let it be kind of a close today. This is our promise to you all. We've been recording this. Thank you, Sarah, for the reminder. We've been recording this. We're going to go ahead and just post.
The chat is saved as well. So
and the chat is saved. So we're going to share both the chat and the recording on our blog. So you will get both of those. We'll put a link on Collaborate as well. And let's just see how things go. We're more than willing to throw another idea swap up if we need it. So that's pretty cool. So just stay in touch with us, and we'll make sure that we keep this conversation going. The other thing I want to mention to you is that we would love to test Zoom rooms. So it's how do you take people in a webinar and put them into separate rooms. And if anybody's interested in doing that, it's a beta test. It's going to be, you know, guinea pig. So let us know through the chat or just send me a separate email. A quick plug for tomorrow at noon, we're doing a webinar, which we're actually talking with another golf association, but talking about a golf association about how just revitalized its chapters around membership. And it's really a technology conversation. That's over with it's the Bill Highway Mariner series. So head on over to Bill Highway to sign up for that. Super cool. CEX is still currently a live program at the end of October. And so we'll keep you in touch with that. But, oh, thank you, Marianne. I will go check out Zeph Godin's information. Hey, guys, it has been fabulous. It has been wonderful. And to my great and dear friend, Diana, thank you so much for coming on and being a part of it. To Kristen, to Allison, to John, to Anne, to all of you who jumped on and shared your ideas. Super, super thanks. It has been our delight. Peter?
Thank you all. See you soon.
Awesome. See you soon.